report on the status of the probation department, and item 45B, report on alternative housing for pregnant justice-involved youth, which were held by Supervisor Horvath. These items will be taken up together. For members of the public joining us remotely, to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature if you are online, or press *3 if on the telephone. Guillermo Viera Rosa, Chief Probation Officer, Sheila Williams, Chief Deputy Administrative Services, and Robert Arcos, Deputy Director, Campus Safety and Security Operations, will make a presentation. For the departmental speakers, please state your name and title for the record when you address the board.
Thank you. Supervisor Horvath, how would you like to proceed?
Do you have a presentation that you'd like to lead with, or should we just get into comments and questions?
I think we've submitted the presentation, but I'm happy to go straight to the...
Happy to have you tee up the situation, and then we can get into it.
Okay, maybe I'll just do a summary, and we could start with the... Good afternoon, I'm Guillermo Viera, the probation officer for the county. As sort of a reminder of where the county and probation department are, there are two legal proceedings underway. One of them was brought on by the Attorney General of California in a request for receivership to be named. That is a court case that is ongoing. Hearings continue, presenting the facts, evidentiary hearings. And the other case is specific.
The next slide. Can you tell them next slide?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
If it's, okay. It's not the first time I've failed to follow the slides.
Why don't you go ahead? You were going to do a summary, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
The other case is specific to the depopulation of Los Padrinos, in which a depopulation plan was presented and accepted by the court under the premise that if the population of Los Padrinos were to be lowered, that the probation department would be in a better position to regain BSCC approval to run that facility as a juvenile hall. We are heading towards the end of that depopulation plan, which had the focus of the plan was to repurpose the utilization of the facilities that we have in the county to house specific populations in each of them in an attempt to sort of right size each of them and better position us to present specific services to specific populations, such as having an all girls and gender expansive campus, having another campus that is for more long-term offenders. And we are sort of toward the end of that. The population at Los Padrinos has dropped and is now closer to the 225 mark, with only one or two more steps before the conclusion of that. And that court case, we have another hearing this Friday.
Yeah, you were summarizing, right?
Yeah, with this slide that you have, slide number 4 shows you the anticipated phases, which ones have been completed. And where we are today is that we have an all-girls campus. It's Kilpatrick in Malibu. We have a long-term offender campus in Silmar, and that is divided into a predisposition juvenile hall for those that have been recommended to be SYTF, has about 35 young men there. And then the traditional SYTF facility. Los Padrinos is now an all-male predisposition facility. There are 2 camps that are left, housing slightly more than 60 young men each. And then there's still Dorothy Kirby, which is for high needs. Next slide is a continuation of some more specifics on when the transfer occurred. And maybe I'll just stop there and allow for questions.
Okay, thank you. I know the last presentation I wasn't able to share directly, but I want to repeat that regarding CVK and pregnant youth in custody, I really want to acknowledge the department's tremendous work on finding alternate locations and continuing to prioritize getting pregnant justice-involved youth out of our facilities. Your approach shows that we can divert youth to alternative placements, and it also highlighted that our capacity for diversion is only as good as the resources that we commit to it. So we know that prioritizing this population in some ways came at the expense of other youth. So I would welcome your department's analysis on making clear additional staff needs to ensure that your diversion unit is equipped with the tools and resources to continue this kind of important work and to build on the success that you have seen in diverting pregnant youth, because I think that's, that shows what we're capable of, and that's what we need to strengthen even more in scale. With respect to Campus Kilpatrick, it's my understanding there was a significant fight and use of force a few weeks ago, and that OC spray was used by line staff, despite an explicit commitment that line staff would not use OC spray, and that it would only be available with supervisor approval in case of emergencies. So what can you tell this board and our public about that incident and the availability of OC spray at Campus Kilpatrick going forward?
Thank you, Supervisor. And without being cryptic, what I can say is that you are correct in your statement. That does not reflect the policy of the probation department, and that there are employees that currently are undergoing investigation and are not being allowed to work. They're off work because of the severity of these allegations. So the commitment remains that line staff are not issued OC spray or pepper spray when they're on that campus. And anytime an employee fails to follow our directives or uses force that is outside the scope of policy, they'll be investigated and disciplined properly. That investigation is still underway.
And we've heard some concerns expressed that relate to the number of staff on site there as well. So what can you tell us about staffing there, and have you made any changes or adjustments to your expectations since it's opening now that it is fully populated?
Yeah, staffing continues to be difficult at all of the facilities. That particular campus actually has a higher ratio of staff assigned to it per young person. Mm-hmm. So it is actually one of the better staffed, and the staff that are working there actually volunteered or bid to work there, which is something that we'd love to see in every facility. I think there have been some adjustments with respect to the number of supervisors that are going to be assigned there. That happened recently, so there will be more supervisors assigned. But in terms of the regular staffing, that already exceeded the BSCC requirements and is better than the other locations.
I'm glad to hear we're exceeding those requirements, and that we're focusing on how increased or enhanced supervision will help to bring about the results that we're intending at that location. This was once upon a time sort of the county's vision for how we would be expanding countywide. And so I think making sure that we maintain our commitment to that is important, and that we're continuing to model at what happens there the kind of treatment, care, and support for our young people that we want to see throughout the system. Moving to the depopulation plan that you had talked about, my understanding from the depopulation plan was that the number that was the target number identified was 175, but you said 225. Or did I misunderstand?
No, you didn't misunderstand. If you look at the depopulation plan that was submitted to the court, the ultimate goal was to be closer to the 175. Mm-hmm. I was stating that today, and we haven't finished the depopulation plan yet, we're already down to 223, which is significantly lower than when we began without finalizing. There have, the amount of young people that are arrested for significant crimes and booked at our facilities is out of our control, and it has been higher than anticipated when that plan was presented. Nonetheless, we're ready to pivot to still try to get as close to that 175. The 175 wasn't based, for example, on the design of the buildings. It was really an attempt of saying, what are the types of numbers that we think we can get to after utilizing all of the diversion or release. So there's nothing magic in the 175. And I'm pleased that how we're getting closer and closer, and without finalizing, if we are even in the 200, 190 range, I think we'll be much better placed for BSCC inspections.
You're absolutely right that you don't have control over the number coming into your facilities from the courts. And one thing that we do have control over as they're coming in is sort of identifying whether it is specifically probation facilities that are the right solution, or whether there might be an alternative that might be better suited for the young people who are coming in, rather than just sort of accepting that. And I go back to, the model that you've adopted for our pregnant youth. You very quickly are intervening, saying that there's a different set of needs here, identifying a placement that is more suitable for the needs of that young person. So I know you're capable of it, and it's happening and working successfully. And I think we need to expand that as we're thinking about the population coming in, which I know is complicated. You're managing, trying to address the challenges that we are facing from the state, but we also have to make sure that as young people are coming in, that they're getting diverted for those who can be to a placement that can more appropriately address what their needs are, and help keep our facilities available for the people who may need to be there. I think similarly for our girls and gender expansive youth, there are still nearly 50 girls or gender expansive youth in our custody. That's been the number for a number of years. And so I want to once again understand what we are looking at in terms of decarceration and helping to find alternative placements, especially recognizing that that was a population that this board had committed to prioritizing in terms of getting out of these facilities to a different kind of setting.
I think the efforts underway for this population may be a good case study on how to deal with sort of smaller populations with specific needs. So I actually think that it was wise of the board to specifically go after this population, and the lessons learned here, I hope to be able to apply as we go to the other campuses. Step one is we need smaller campuses with specific treatment modalities for that population, specific training for employees that work there, and then I think that that's going to tie to what's available in the community for them, because it's not just what happens to them while they're in the facility, it's about how quickly we can get them out safely, and then the support network they're going to have afterwards so they don't return to us. But what I will say is that there is probably sort of a number that we're going to push up against with respect to the courts. We're down to 45 on that campus, and I don't know what the right number, the natural number is going to be that the courts will still think that it's safe to release during that period. My hope is that what we do is we continue to offer more and more options to the courts, and that we do the assessments for alternative placements more quickly. So as we get better giving options to the courts and finding for difficult to place young people facilities or providers that could do that, that's sort of where, I don't know what the right number is. Maybe the right number is 39. Maybe it's 4. Whatever that number is, that we know that we're not leaving anything on the table because we haven't sought the resources necessary. And so that's sort of the process that we're in. To your point, that can't just be for this population at that one campus. And so that is the model that we hope to follow at every of the campuses, first with the reduction, because it is difficult when you have a much larger facility at 225, and to have those positive interactions, because despite of the setbacks that we had with bad behavior at Kilpatrick, this is a place where rehabilitation can take place. I mean, I think if you speak to the families, speak to the young people, it is dramatically different than where they were before. So we don't want to lose that. We want to capitalize on it and then utilize that same model for the rest of the locations.
Along those lines, I would say, we are aware that a lot of state funding that gets provided to help invest in alternative placement sites or other kinds of programming, whether it's with DYD or other contracted providers, comes to your department. And so I would say, making sure that the resources that do come to the probation department for that kind of investment in those alternative solutions, we want to make sure that that's actually being invested, because I know that that's what it's intended for. And if the department needs support in making sure that those resources get spent in places that give you those alternative solutions, that would be helpful to hear, because it is our expectation that those dollars that get invested in the department actually turn into other places for our young people to go. Finally, I would say we've heard concerns that the CSEC unit, that the team there, which helps youth who have been trafficked either for sex work or for labor, is effectively unstaffed. So how many staff are currently working in that unit, and how is probation working with our other county partners to make sure that services and referrals provided by that unit are continuing? Because I know that that's an important unit on any given day, but especially with the kinds of events that are coming here, while we know that there's not always direct correlation between large events and human trafficking, it is a conversation that people will continue to have, and there will be continued awareness and heightened awareness around this issue, and making sure the resources that we expect to be in place are actually working is important.
Yeah, the reality is that we are short-staffed in almost every area, specifically because we've been pushing resources to meet the state requirements in juvenile halls and SYTFs. That's true. It is also true that, and our own staff sometimes are the best advocates. They believe the programs they work, and so when they don't believe they're getting the right resources, they scream out and say, look, this is important work that we can't forget. But it's not true that we don't have staff there. They have had reductions like in every other part of the department. But there's still a full-time dedicated director. There's still a supervising deputy probation officer. There's still a DPO2. I'd have to go back.
Specifically in that unit?
Yes. I'd have to go back and see what their original number was. I think, maybe how much have they been cut back. But no, they've not been closed down, and they do have the resources. Much more limited than before. It is important work that we've sort of had to look at and say, where can we cut without completely decimating, in hopes that tomorrow we can get more staff to put in there. So just to be clear, I'm not disputing that, like many other parts of probation that are exceedingly important for public safety, that's a smaller number in that unit now. But no, they still have, I know minimally they have director, supervisor, DPO2, and possibly more. Additionally, there are other units, such as some of our field units that have to do with internet crimes against children, that can support them when needed. So that is one of the areas that we've sort of red circled that is important to keep alive. Maybe not fully, but when we can't, but at no point are we sort of closing the doors and not doing those referrals.
And I would offer, again, if there's, given the challenges that the department faces, if there's a need for outside support, I know organizations that have come, that we're already working with as a county, like Cast LA, on this issue, would be very interested in working collaboratively with the department to make sure our youth are supported. That's also an option, and we want to make sure that that population of our young people, while it may be small in number, those issues are severe and complicated and complex, and we want to make sure that you have the support to address them. Thank you.
Supervisor Hahn.
Yeah, thank you. I know, Chief Viera Rosa, that your team has completed almost all the stages of the Los Padrinos depopulation plan that the judge approved in May of 2025. My stance was always, I thought the depopulation plan should focus on releasing more youth from Los Padrinos who could safely live at home or in a community placement, ankle monitor if needed, instead of relying on shuffling youth around to different facilities. And now that the depopulation plan is almost entirely implemented, as you said, the population at Los Padrinos has not gone down as much as I think even you had hoped. The goal was for 175. Today, there are 223. Yesterday, there was 227, so we're 5 down from yesterday. But I also think the depopulation plan that just moved youth around didn't seem to be focusing on safely releasing youth. The population across all of probation facilities has not decreased at all. In fact, it has increased from 558 youth back in May to 589 youth today. And just on, I mean, I'm sure this is not the outcome that you intended or hoped for either, and wondering, you know, what maybe how you're, if there's any room for pivoting at this point or trying something different. I noticed you made some comment about community programs, and I saw David come up to the dais. And before maybe you answer on pivoting, maybe David, do we have enough good out there community programs to support youth being released into the community? And certainly we hope that some of those programs out there are preventing youth from either re-entering or, you know, staying out of our juvenile justice system at all. What's going on out there under your leadership?
Sure. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. The short answer is that I believe that there are enough organizations, but there certainly isn't enough funding. I'll give you an example. The RAID program, which is our Reentry Action for Youth program, we started it with less than 200 potential placements, and the demand from the court as well as the defense attorneys was so massive that it's up to 400 now, and we're at full capacity and shifting some dollars around within our budget to add just another 140 placements for the rest of this fiscal year. Judges have been using that program, sometimes in combination with CDP, to let young people go home instead of going into Los Padrinos. So there certainly are, and each organization has a certain number of cases that each case manager can manage. So we are adding, but certainly additional resources would allow us to expand programs like that. We also have currently 3 young women that are in a supportive housing, home-like environment with Zoe International, which is one of our contracted agencies, and we've invested about $500,000 in a new way of life to be our first true safe healing center, which we are extremely excited about. Lastly, we as a county are looking at purchasing our own building to be a safe healing center, and going through the various processes, the legal processes, to make sure that we can do that and then hand over the management responsibilities to a community-based organization. So there are things that are taking place, there are things that are working, but there certainly is a need for additional resources. We're working with the bench quite a bit with Judge Espinoza. We're co-located in the Inglewood Courthouse, and one of their attorneys has said every young person could benefit from these wraparound services in community. And quite frankly, we just don't have the capacity. So we're only taking the young people who absolutely otherwise would be held in custody. So hopefully that answers the question, but happy to add
Yeah,
more.
sort of. I mean, I'm going to still keep pushing. I still think it's the right, philosophy, at least for me, to push for more of these young people who can, and the courts agree, to be safely released. But we just want to make sure the infrastructure is out there. You said it is kind of, but we could use more funding, which is kind of true for everyone. But I still think overall that's a better place for those, again, who have been deemed, by the courts that they can be safely released. I just want to keep pushing for that, because I think the current depopulation plan, honestly, is never going to get us to where we want to be, no matter how many times we, shuffle them around. So I still feel like that is the underused piece of depopulation in my mind so far. But it's going to take a lot of work from all angles. But back to Chief, anything else you're thinking of pivoting differently on to really lower our numbers, not just at Los Padrinos, but overall?
Yeah, no, I think our goal should always be to live in a county in which we have the lowest possible number of young people in the system, adults as well. So the prevention work has to continue, and we look forward to the work that our partners can do with respect to that. When it comes to difficult to place or hard to place, which is sometimes what they just mean is folks that have very specific needs, no, we never have enough space for them. You know, we have cases on if you have a young person that has had a sexual assault case, plus they have developmental disabilities, plus they've escaped before, plus they've been violent, that becomes very difficult to find a placement regardless. And as our capacity goes up, typically capacity doesn't go up for those type of young people. That's really where I would say if there was a need is to find really for them, because they're the ones that stay in our system longer because we simply cannot find a place for them that will accept them, they could deal with their needs. With respect to the depopulation plan, I just want to be very clear. I don't think we're as far apart as maybe folks are seeing because it's not complete. So we're at 223 today. In estimation, when we do the final move to include higher capacity at Dorothy Kirby because of the removal of the girls from there, that could drop us down another 25. Now we're getting close to the sub 200, which is much more in line with what the original projection was. That's a different question than having more capacity so that we can offer more options to judges. I think that there is room for growth there, like I said, on these sort of specific populations. But, you know, and the last thing I'll say is that, sometimes folks confuse and they think that because there's a depopulation plan, that changed the authority to release kids. That never changed the authority that I have to release young people. The majority of them are still in there because there's a judicial order in which they have to remain in custody.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I get that. So this weekend, the Southern California News Group article was published over the weekend, and it highlighted the violence that spiked in the early days of moving youth from Los Padrinos to other facilities, particularly Barry J. And again, that's part of the, consequences of shuffling kids around. And as you keep, working on your depopulation plan by moving the developmentally disabled youth from Los Padrinos to Dorothy Kirby, in light of, as you said, our ongoing staffing challenges and our, our strong belief against the use of OC spray, what's your plan to prevent this type of violence from occurring?
Well, I mean, we currently are being monitored with respect to use of force, and we have lots of reports to show how we're doing in terms of reducing. And I differ from much of what is written in the media. I mean, it's just irresponsible, some of the figures that they put, and simply say that there's been an increase in violence. That just isn't the case. And that's not what we're presenting as facts, that's not what's taking place. When we talk about specific incidents, those are true, and there are fights, but they don't give the whole context, and they get the facts wrong. There wasn't a mix in population, and that's why young people fought. It wasn't so violent that young people were injured and had to go to the hospital. That also didn't happen. So I'm not minimizing, and we are doing everything we can with respect to having specific response groups that are able to use different modality and talk kids down if they're having, rather than use of force. Those are part of our agreement with the Department of Justice. We are hiring more folks that have undergone either licensing or they're training to be licensed as a social worker or LMFT so that they're actually on the facilities. There's a whole host of things that we're doing despite the fact that the reality is being presented in the newspaper incorrect. Our personal belief and our mandate is to try to have a zero violence facility. And so internally, we're making those changes by changing staff, changing training, in our annual training that there are additional courses that are being given to every peace officer we've added. So, I mean, we're continuing that work.
Do you think lack of programming leads at all to, I know we've seen it, I know Supervisor Barger has seen it, just when we visit the boredom, the really lack of being able to do anything, that does that in any way lead to, obviously some spikes in fights or violence or anxiousness or, boredom? I mean, I would still argue that wish we had a lot more positive programming happening so there was something constructive to do, particularly on the weekends. I don't remember from this article when the spike in violence they reported, but it just feels like that leads to, I think even with my own kids, when they were bored, it just seemed to transition to,
I concur.
rowdy behavior. Thank you, Supervisor.
Rowdy behavior. I concur with you, Supervisor. I would just say that I think we need to start pivoting from quantity to quality. So I think that if you look at the number of programs that we have at any given time, there's a lot of programs. And I think that what we have is a population that needs to be engaged. And the quality of the instructor, the quality of the curricula, those things might matter more than simply throwing more programs sort of at this problem. And at some point, we have to be ready to actually do assessments to see what has actual impact versus simply paying for more programs.
Absolutely. You should be doing that. It shouldn't be, we eventually should do that. You absolutely should be doing that now. And I remember, you listed, I forget how many programs, but our lived experience when we go visit doesn't seem to corroborate that. So I think that might be, again, this pivoting a little bit to what we're doing, how we're shuffling people around, trying to prevent violence. I really think that is an element of cause and effect. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I just want to be very, very brief and say I appreciate the progress that's been made to safely transfer female and gender expansive youth to Camp Kilpatrick and to see the reduction in Los Padrinos population. And I get it, it's not all up to you in terms of who gets released or not. But I also want to thank you and the staff for finally taking note how important it is to keep pregnant youth out of our probation facilities. And the fact that I think just last Thursday, a pregnant youth was taken into custody, but yesterday was released on electronic monitoring. So there are things we can do that are in your control. And I would just say, let's keep doing that. And again, I just hunker back to almost 10 years ago when I visited Central Juvenile Hall. You weren't here, but some people were. And I'll never forget the depiction in my mind, embedded, seeing a 6-month pregnant teenager shackled at her ankles, walking around with other girls. And it was as though it was a regimen. And for me, that really taught me that what are we doing here and why is it that they have to be treated in that manner? We've come a long way, but we still have to think about that. And when we talk about the carceral system, we really have to understand these are minors. And I get it, there are some that are there for very serious offenses, but there are many that are not, that just come from really bad, troubled backgrounds and need good supervision and need good, not just staff, but supervisors of the staff. And as you said, people who have advanced education in psychology or social work that understand de-escalation, therapy, mentorship, and all of those things that a young person needs. So I just keep that consistent, and I think, hopefully we'll be able to satisfy somebody. That's what my hope is. So thank you for your presentation, and we'll go now to public comment. Oh, yes.
I know I was putting my name up, taking it off because so many of my colleagues asked the questions I had, but I just wanted to say, based on your last comment, Supervisor Solis, about 10 years ago, I hope that we stop the yo-yo effect, where the pendulum swings one way and then the other, that we never return to those days of 10 years ago. We've seen it at Department of Corrections, where under one administration, pregnant women were no longer shackled, and then a new governor comes in and pregnant women are shackled. So I hope that we can just continue along the path of where we are now and holding the line. Thank you, Supervisor. That we never return to that time of 10 years ago, because that's not what we've seen in the adult system. So thank you for reminding us of that relatively recent history.
Thank you very much to the staff. And
Okay, thank
do
you.
you have a last comment there, Chief? No?
No, usually I know to get off the microphone, but to your point, Supervisor, some of the changes that we're making are because we want them to be fully institutionalized, and not just to be there because the person that happens to be in charge believes in it. So point well taken.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Let's go to a public comment.